How's it going, everybody? My name is Corbin, and these turned out a lot better than I was expecting. I'm really happy at how they looked, and obviously, if you're watching this video, you're probably curious on how to build these yourselves. If you're like me, you maybe been scrolling through Pinterest and seen artwork like this, and wanted to buy, a piece like this, but seeing that it's five, six, 700, over $1,000 for certain pieces, something like this size. I was like, crap, I can't afford that. So I decided I was going to try and make my own. And I'm happy with the results. And I'm happy to be sharing with you how I did this. You can see I made four here, and I tested four different methods on how to build them. And I've come up with the best solution and all the steps on this. And I'm going to lay it out in this video. So stick around and we will jump right in.
So for supplies, I ended up buying these 5x8 wooden dowels from my local hardwood store. I did use anywhere from 15 to 20 of these per square, so I ended up buying over 100 of them. But there are cheaper options if you wanted to cut your own. I don't have a table saw, so that's the option I had to go with. You could also use thicker wood if you wanted a cheaper option. Next, I bought a 2x2 birch plywood. This is 1/4 quarter-inch thick, and I will have links down below to all the supplies that I used as well. And the first step you're going to want to do is to sand down your plywood. Make sure it's nice and smooth and ready to stain. You'll see in this video the stain color that I used at first I ended up not liking. So this stain color was the first one that I used, but I ended up scrapping this piece of wood and using a different stain. I just didn't get a video of me staining the other piece of wood, so this is the one that I used. And for all these cuts, I'm either doing them at 45 or at 0, or 45 over here, right there, 45. That just makes everything simple. If you want to get crazy, you can do different angles, but if you just keep it at 0 and 45, it'll make your life a lot easier. And here's the first method I used to create the first piece. I would literally cut all the pieces and then I would tape them to the backing board to measure everything out. I don't recommend this process just because the tape would wiggle a little bit, the cuts would get a little bit off, and then when it came for me to actually stain the wood and attach it, I had to go back and make cuts again. And here's what it looked like after I got done making all the cuts. Like I said, you could go this route if you wanted to, but I don't recommend it. This first piece took me the longest out of any of them by far because I made all the cuts and then I had to go back and recut it because things got off a little bit. So it works, but it definitely takes a lot longer. I'm going to show you a better way here in a little bit. As I mentioned, I changed the stain and here's the color that I went with. After I got done doing all those cuts, I took them off of that backing board and then I went and stained all of the pieces on all three sides, just not the one side that was touching the boards. After the stain had dried, then I went through and attached them. I used wood glue and brad nails. I started with the frame and then kind of built my anchor pieces, so to speak. I didn't really have a specific design in mind when I was building these. I just kind of started messing around with different angles and things and found something that I liked. You could be a little more proactive and make your designs before you go, but I was just kind of winging it. As you see here, I'm using one of the dowels as a spacer, so to make sure that everything stays consistent. And also make sure you wipe away wood glue as you are building this because that will show up in the piece if you don't. So overall, the first one turned out amazing. Like I said, it just took a lot longer than I was expecting it to, and I knew that there had to be a better way. So for the second one, I tried a different method, which I also wouldn't recommend, and I'll point out why. It definitely was a lot faster for the second one, but the quality wasn't as good. And here's how the first one turned out. Really happy with it. Did have to go back and fill in the holes with wood filler, but it looks awesome. It just took way longer than it should have. So for the second one, I decided instead of dry fitting everything, taping it on, taking it off, staining it, and then putting it on, that I would save a lot of time by just attaching everything right from the beginning without staining it, and then staining it after. This was a mistake. Probably some of you already know this right off the bat, but it made staining really difficult and inconsistent, and there was a lot of creases where I couldn't really get in the nooks and crannies. So here's the first one that I tried to stain before I tried to stain it after I had attached everything. And as you can see, it just, you can't tell from far away, but as I look at it, I'm like, oh dang it, I wish I would have done that. So you can see it's hard to get in between these spots. And even if you look down below, you can see it's not stained very well there either. So I definitely recommend staining all of your pieces before you start attaching them. And I think I found the best way to do it now. Essentially what I did here is, you can't really tell, but I stained everything on this piece so far. So these are all stained, and this is like the foundation of my piece, and I'm going to build off of all these other pieces. So these are going to come diagonal off of this piece, these are going to come this way off of this piece, and then I'm going to have diagonals off of this piece. And I'm going to do it off of these ones over here that haven't been stained. I'm going to dry fit them, get those all in place, and then go back and stain them, and you'll kind of see what I mean. But I think this is the best way because that way the tape wasn't really holding stuff in place, and so my cuts were getting off just slightly, so I'd end up having to do like double and triple cuts. So I think this is going to be the best way going forward. So now I'm just going through and dry fitting everything. Notice how I have spacers just in between each of these. And for measurements, I'm literally just putting it up against here and then making the marks on where the cuts need to be. And then coming back over to the miter saw and making the cuts just right here. So I'm going to make this cut. And this happens a lot where it's just slightly off, so I got to go make the other cut. But it's always better to be longer than shorter. So and there it is. So you can see it's a pretty tedious process, but it ends up looking cool, at least in my opinion. So we'll keep the progress going. And here's some random stop motion footage that I was playing around with. And as you can see here, I'm following that same method, just having kind of my foundation pieces ready. And then I went back and dry fitted all of these cuts and then stained them and then went back and attached them. And coming up here, you'll see a picture of kind of what that stage looks like in between when I have my foundation pieces that are stained, and then I'm dry fitting all of the other pieces to fit inside of there. And to finish things off, I did fill in my brad nail holes with some wood filler. I use this DAP wood filler. I'll leave links to this stuff all down below. And then I did finish off as well with a coat of polyurethane, water-based, to protect the artwork. And then I used sawtooth hooks to attach them to the walls. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. I will do my best to respond to everything. And we will see you in the next video. If you're already subscribed, I love you. If you're not, maybe consider subscribing. See you in the next one.